What's going on, guys? It's Jordan here, bringing you another vlog basically explaining how we create some of the simulations that we've been releasing recently. The latest simulation, the temple, has done really well, so thank you all very much for that. I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to go and check that out right now, because it's super cool. So basically I'm just going to run through some of the techniques that I use in finding sounds, editing the sounds, and then spatializing them as well, so that you get the 3D effect. So yeah, let's just jump right into that. What's going on, guys? So I just wanted to take you through basically what I do with the simulations and how I create them. A lot of people have been asking for a bit more of an insight into the process of how I do things, so I thought that I'd just do a little breakdown of exactly how it happens and how I kind of put things together. So as you can see, this is the project. I've kind of laid it out fairly straightforwardly because I've just got a specific workflow where I kind of work through the timeline of everything from start to finish, as well as top to bottom, so you can kind of see like the initial stuff is near the top and then the more middle stuff in the middle, and then at the end when the whole big choir and stuff comes in, it's all at the bottom at this side. So it kind of just helps me to identify where things are and how things are put together basically. So what I tend to do when I start is I'll usually start with the kind of feel or ambience of the simulation and what we're going for. So I had the idea of starting off outside of a temple in the forest and then trekking up towards the temple. So this is basically how the simulation starts, with just these ambiences here, which I will solo so you can hear. So this kind of gives just the feel of the area and the start. It's the main objective, I think, with these simulations is to kind of put you in a kind of new environment, so to speak, and get immersed in like a different world for a period of time. So I feel like ambience is a really important thing for that. What I tend to do is I'll find like one or two ambience tracks that I really like, that I'll source from like YouTube or something that are free from copyright, and then I'll split them into sets of 4 and then decorrelate them so that they're not the same. So as you can see, even though this is the same recording here, they're decorrelated so that they're not overlapping. This just means that when I put them into spatialization in Reaper, I can actually pan them in 4 different directions, and it gives much more of an immersive feel than simply just having one ambience track panned to the middle. It generally gives that more like all-around encompassed environmental feel, rather than just having one in the middle, and it kind of feels a bit not very immersive because it's essentially just coming from the middle of the soundscape that you're hearing essentially. It's very apparent when you compare the two at how different they sound, so this is basically how I do things. So apart from these ambiences, once I've got that, I'll tend to think like basically about how I want the timeline to kind of come together. So I always think about it in terms of parts, about what's going on. So in the first area, it's quite a forested kind of area, so I'll be thinking there'll be like wolves, as you can hear here. Wolves and owls, some forest creatures, and I like to have like call and responses, because when I spatialize them, it means that I can kind of have them panned in 2 separate ways. I've also got these mice, if I can find them. Of course I can't find them now. Oh yeah, there they are, the mice. So you can hear these mice actually in the spatialization. They're quite a subtle thing, but I have them kind of like scuttering across the road from left to right, and it's just like something that I know that I can make a nice little touch with later on. So I kind of source some mice and other things so I can take best advantage of the immersion and spatialization that I'll be able to do later on. So once we get out of the wooded area, you kind of happen upon this priest who's at a door, as you can hear here, and he kind of slides the big stone door across to the temple so that you can go inside. You can also hear the footsteps throughout, which kind of help with the sense of moving through an area. If you didn't have footsteps, it would be quite difficult to place yourself in an environment, but I think because the footsteps are there, it kind of gives you a better idea of you're slowly moving through a kind of environment and making progress towards something. They're quite subtle in the forested area because there's quite a lot of ambience going on. But if I solo them, you can hear them quite clearly. You're kind of just moving through an area. And I thought this stone door also was something that's quite interesting for spatialization, which you'll hear later as well. I basically make it so that it pans from left to right in front of you and gives you the sense that it's really sliding out of the way. And there's quite a few little touches like that I think really helped to give you that sense of I'm really moving through an area and like going deeper into this temple. So basically in Cubase what I really like to do overall is just timeline the whole thing out, because if I'm honest, I'm not very fluent in Reaper, and although Reaper is far superior for spatialization, I'm much quicker at putting stuff together in Cubase. So once I'd sourced all the sounds, I kind of timelined them out in here in the way that I desired. Had an idea of where I wanted everything to go. I put the footsteps together, all the ambiences. There's also these nice atmospheres which kind of give that foreboding sense of the temple. Which I thought were quite a nice touch, because they give it a real sense of foreboding and like you're really delving into something dark and mysterious. Some of the other processing stuff that I like to do is with voices. I usually like to pitch them up or down with transpose and then do some kind of, you know, general processing on them just to make them a bit more interesting or cool. Like for example, this priest.
And so we seek and rest our eyes upon the light.
Is actually my voice.
A beam of holy refuge from the plagues of the dark.
But I've just added reverb and pitched it down, and as you can see it actually makes my voice sound quite different.
Let it take us once more into the beam we glide.
And I just think it's a really nice touch to have that. It basically makes things much more interesting and immersive. It's one of the ways that I like to process things. Voices especially, I tend to pitch them in different ways because it just gives them a bit more of a mysterious feel or an interesting, darker feel, especially in this instance if you pitch them down. So my voice, as you can hear now, is not that imposing or interesting in reality. It's just a fairly standard voice, but once you process it a bit, it really gives it that darker feel, which I thought was pretty cool. What else have we got? Torches. Just some torches. I basically grouped them in this way so that I could spatialize them later on, so that they kind of sound like they're going past you. So they kind of like come up and down in volume, and then I'll also spatialize them so it sounds like you're passing a set of torches, each set of footsteps, which I thought was quite a good touch. The torches just add a nice little bit of extra ambience as well, and a kind of mood setter. You know, you think like dark temple, torches, etc.
Let it take us.
Here you can hear another priest talking.
Everlasting and shimmer for eternity. If we do not see, our eyes will falter and fail. For not to see is not to know truth, and to cower from embrace.
So as you can hear, it's just like a big fat reverb. There's quite a lot of reverb on everything once you get inside the temple, just to add to that kind of sense of space and scale. And it really feels like you're delving deep into something which is quite mysterious. The final thing really is that I composed these sets of chants for the chanting at the end. It's basically just a few layers of samples and also some stuff that I wrote quickly with some plugins that I like to use. For this one I think I'm using Contact as a sampler, and I'm using Exhale, which is this really cool suite. You can basically create like really cool vocal, just general, lots of different vocal like cuts or choirs. And for this example I'm using it to create this kind of really dark ambient choir, and then I just layered a few different layers on top of each other, as you can hear. And then as you can hear, as I introduced all the different layers, they all build up slowly towards the end. You can see there's kind of an additive thing going on, which I thought was really cool. And it slowly gets more and more intense towards the end until it finishes. And that's about it really. It's really not as complex as it may seem. I've just timelined out all the samples, essentially sourced them how I wanted them, processed them if they needed a bit of adjustment, and then I composed the choir bit at the end along with getting some voice acting for the priests, etc. And that's all really for Cubase. So if I move over to Reaper, you can see that I've basically got the same stems as I had before. They've all just been exported and then re-imported into Reaper, as you can see. So these are all the same stems that I've basically just taken from my Cubase project that's been timelined out in the way that I want. and imported into Reaper so that I can spatialize them. One of the first things that I mentioned is how these decorrelated ambiences would be good, because it means that you can spatialize them in a more immersive manner. So if we take a listen, you can hear that they're all around. For example, if we just solo one, you can hear this one's forward left. If I bring it to the middle, like, you get the sense that it's there, but it kind of feels like it's on top of you. Whereas if you have them far away and then you have 4, it feels a lot more immersive and a lot more around you in an environment rather than on top of you, which I think is really important for the simulation, because you really need that sense of like, oh wow, I'm moving through an environment, rather than the environment just feeling like it's completely on top of you. So if we introduce all these ambiences, you can get a feel of just how immersive the environment is. This is one of the next things that I wanted to mention, which is the mice that I talked about before. Basically, Spatialize automated them so that they move from right to left, as you just heard. They're moving across the path of the individual who's moving through the forest, which I think is cool. It's just little touches like that, I think, that really give you the sense that the world around you is moving and evolving rather than just being static. You can hear the movement again there. I think it's really important, and it's really interesting to make the best use you can of the spatialization in order to, you know, give an immersive experience. So if I move down these stems some more, we reach a point where the stone door, which I mentioned, opens, and you can actually hear with this spatialization that it moves from left to right as it moves out the way, which I'll show you now. I thought that was a really cool touch, because it gives you the sense that like you're really moving into something, and then it moves behind you and closes, which I think is like a really good signifier to show you that you've entered a new, not only a new environment, but also you're getting that progression combined with the footsteps into a new area, which is cool. So in this instance, you can get an idea of the torches now and how they move from forward to back. If I open the spatialization for these, you can see, well, let's just show you these two. They're basically being automated to move past you, and then there's 2 sets, and then they reset, and then the next set comes and they move past you. And although it's only a subtle touch, I think it really makes a big difference to that sense of you're really moving into a new environment, which I think is really cool. I think another cool thing about this simulation is how you can basically make something like the choir, which felt like it was kind of all on top of each other, into something that's a lot bigger sounding, because you can spatialize it in a really cool way.
A beam of holy refuge from the plagues.
So if you look at these different elements of the choir, this main element is forward.
Let it take us.
And then
once more,
if you listen through them all, you can hear this one's like back left. This one's forward left. This one's like back right. This one's left. This one's forward left. This one's forward right. So I think it's like really cool that you can do that, because it makes it all sound like it's really around you and that you've like moved into this environment. If I solo all them together, you really get an idea of what. It's a bit loud. So this is how I do it. This is basically how I made the temple simulation. So to summarise, I just did all the timelining, acquired the assets that I needed for Cubase, and then I did it all in Cubase essentially, the timelining, because I'm fluent in it. Put all the stuff together, got the ambiances, did some processing, and then to spatialize it I moved into Reaper, put the stems in, and then used the Facebook 360 Studio suite, these spatializing plugins, to essentially move stuff around. And then you can automate these parameters as well, so you can kind of make things move in real time, which is what I did for like the mice and the big stone door, etc. I just think it's really cool, and that's basically how I made the simulations. And then this whole time I've been showing you this in binaural, which is essentially the ambisonics decoded to stereo so that you can hear it effectively for this. But I would actually export this in ambisonic second order as well, so I could put it into Premiere Pro, and then in Premiere Pro I'd have the project set up so that it acquires that ambisonic file and then exports it in ambisonics, which I could then put on YouTube. And that's literally how I did it. So if you wanted to do this yourself, you could just download this suite, get a template for ambisonics off the internet, and put it all together, and then have some fun with it, really. Like, I mean, it's really good and it's really interesting. It's something that we're very interested in and we're going to keep releasing. So thank you very much for watching. We really appreciate it. If you want to leave a comment below, if you have any questions, that would be very, very useful. I hope this has answered a lot of the questions that you had already. And I'd just like to say thanks a lot for your interest, and I hope you give this video a like and a comment and get involved and all that stuff. Go listen to the temple simulation because it's out now. And thanks a lot, guys. See you later.